Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Victor Zolfo SDSA, and today I am pleased to welcome set decorator Claire Levinson-Gendler SDSA and production designer Richard Bullock to discuss their dynamic collaboration on the thrilling reimagined Peacock series, The Day of the Jackal. Claire and Richard, so nice to meet you guys. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Great to meet you, Victor.
Day of the Jackal is a beloved 1973 thriller, kind of a twisting, high-octane, edge-of-your-seat movie. And this reimagination has all the espionage and political intrigue and excitement of the book and the original film. Let me start by asking Claire, what brought you to the project?
Well, actually, it was Richard who contacted me about it. And I had seen the film, but it was a long time ago. But I obviously I knew what the story was, and I found it quite exciting. I went back, I watched the film again. I wondered whether it might seem a little bit dated, which it didn't at all. It was so surprising how slick and cool it still looked, just like there was on so many levels. And then I also read the book because I thought, well, it just gives you like another element to it. And so once I got the scripts, and it was, it's such an exciting project. It had so much, to give in all the episodes as well. So yeah, it was very exciting.
Richard, what brought you to the project?
Well, I was approached by Brian Kirk, the director, who I had met before. And I mean, for someone of my generation, in the UK, The Day of the Jackal is completely in sort of the cinematic DNA. It was one of the coolest films around that we watched as kids and as growing up. And I mean, my dad was reading The Day of the Jackal while my mother was giving birth to me in a hospital. He was at a hotel bar reading The Day of the Jackal. It's that much in my DNA. And so I was super excited to read these scripts, which were amazing and picked up on the kind of that stripped back kind of cool, that lean, mean sort of feel that the original film has and that the novel has. So and it was all there in the script, so it was super exciting, and it felt like it linked really well with the original work, the book and the film. So that was all extremely exciting, and it was a no-brainer. I just wanted to do it.
I heard that Frederick Forsyth was actually a consulting producer on the show. Did you ever cross paths with him?
Unfortunately not. I would have loved to. I was at the premiere and I saw him there, and I was just so kind of in awe. It was just this kind of legendary figure. Unfortunately, I didn't speak to him. But yeah, how amazing that he was linked to the project.
Oh yeah, very exciting. Well, what were your initial conversations, both of you, like with the director and with getting started on the production? I mean, was it all sort of laid out, all 10 episodes, or did you step through it one at a time?
Well, I think I just had the first 2 episodes, and the vision was very much kind of inspired by the original film, the Fred Zinnemann film, and also by all the amazing paranoid thrillers of the 1970s, like the Alan J. Pakula kind of, that sort of vibe. And also, it has to be said, a little bit of the kind of the Bond aesthetic, and that immediately chimed with Brian, the director. He kind of got on board with that, and Chris Ross, who was the director of photography, was also in there. But that was where we started. But when Claire came in, she brought like a whole new level of detail and richness that was another layer on top of that. So for me, it was like making a film that was in the kind of in the spirit of those 70s paranoid thrillers, but with modern filming techniques and a modern kind of sensibility, a modern take on it.
Claire, did you immediately vibe on the Bond aesthetic and start to get flowing in that world?
When I met with Richard was already in Hungary and I hadn't gone out there. And I had already started doing bits and pieces and putting images together myself of how I was kind of visualizing some of the sets and scripts. And we did a Zoom call and looked at it. And it was definitely in his world. It felt like I was on the right page. Richard had a really, really good relationship with Brian, the director, and Brian was very interested in every element of it, right down to like the smallest detail. So the kind of overall look of it was like really, really clear, so strong, really quickly, which was such a pleasure for me because it meant that there was time to really focus on how far you go within that, within the sets. And Brian was really, really on board with that. And he championed talking to the actors in terms of making sure that the detail, right down to the finest thing, the smallest pen, that everything had a reason and a purpose and it was all multi-layered. He really got on board with the idea, which I love, of like there's a whole narrative going on beyond that. Mm-hmm. And that's, there's quite a thing when you look at, especially the aesthetic of like, as Richard was talking about, some of the images of the reference, it's quite stark. And so the idea of not putting too much into some of those worlds, sometimes it's like deciding where it's going to be less and where it's going to be more. But it was, it was such a good collaboration, between Richard and Brian. It worked really well for me. I felt like I fit in really well with that.
It's like we had the broad brushstrokes and had blocked it out, and then Claire came in with that level of intense detail, which is really magical. Actually, it really brought it alive because it was a big canvas we were working on, and there's no way one person can do all that. And it was just fantastic. I think Brian felt the same thing, Brian, the director, when Claire came in, and the actors actually. And there was just suddenly this intensity of detail going on that was completely transformative, right down to I hope you don't mind me saying, Claire, that there was on every set there's a jackal. There's a little jackal figure. And you could spend a lot of time trying to find them, but yeah. But that was what was really great, and it's so nice having that kind of creative, sort of experience.
Oh yeah, the freedom and the excitement to pursue those details it's unusual. I mean, you don't often get that opportunity, and to have the director and the actors and everybody benefiting from all that, the layering and the character enhancement. That's fantastic. I mean, I could really see it in a set like Bianca's house. When you said earlier when we were chatting that it was in Budapest, I thought I've worked there, and it is incredibly difficult to find things that look like a UK or an American location. Did you have to bring everything in?
What you're saying is totally correct. They're very much London people. They're, professional people. Their world was very specific, and that world was quite tricky to find in Hungary. There are definitely elements of their world which I did bring from London, but they were small elements actually. I think in the end we did quite well with the bigger elements, and Richard will tell you, obviously it's all a build, so the bookcases and various things in there were put in. But in terms of the smaller things, like I love art. I'm an artist myself. I'm a painter. When I look at the sets, I always pull out the characters and I do like a kind of bio. There's the bio of the character that is written in the script, and that gives you all the information for the character. And then I kind of pad that out so that I can build them a whole world, because in somebody's house, when they've lived there a certain period of time, especially if they've got children, which they do, they have a daughter, there's layers and layers of family and life. I like to do a kind of separate bio, if you like, of the characters. And I decided that Lashana's character, Bianca, would be interested in art. And so what that did for me, that gave me a really amazing opportunity to look at London artists, like young Black artists really doing well, who are like just coming on board, which I think that would go very well with her aesthetic and her vibe. In fact, there's a lot of levels of things that I thought they were interested in, which I've incorporated into their world. But as I said to you, like the interiors were in Hungary, and the exterior she walks in is in London.
Very convincing. A really beautiful set. Did you shoot all your interiors in Hungary, or did you have any anywhere else? Or was it all exteriors on location and then stage work in Budapest?
It was mainly exteriors on location, and then interiors in Budapest. I think we maybe have done, there was probably one interior in London, maybe, or one or two. And we didn't go to quite as many places as it might appear. Budapest, as you probably know, if you've worked there, it doubles very well for a lot of different places. And then Croatia is, you know, a 4 or 5 hour drive away, and that's where we did Spain. So yeah, we did an awful lot of research, and there was a lot of graphics and so on signifying where we were, but actually we didn't travel quite as much as it appears.
You've talked a bit about the characters and the themes and how they informed your decisions, both decorating and designing. What about the Jackal? What about the Cadiz house and his home environment being so secretive and hidden from his family, and yet there's a warmth and a tenderness to the environment? Just how did you approach the character in this respect?
It was quite difficult because we often talked about how committed the Jackal was to his whole family life, and how, because he's a ghost everywhere, he's a ghost, and so therefore it was always questionable how much of him you would see in this world. Obviously, he's a man of great taste. We talked through the Jackal and his personality a lot. In fact, I talked to Eddie quite a bit about it. And we put things like masks, and we looked at different kinds of books of masking and different sort of acts and things. We sort of trying to look at the Jackal in terms of character. But it was quite tricky. I feel like when you talk about the warmth in the house, I feel like that is very much his wife's character in there, putting that in. But actually, when it came to his office, that was actually quite tricky, because obviously he's invisible at all times. So to actually put him into this world, especially when I'm always so kind of focused on, well, who are these people and what do they do? Whereas we didn't have that with him. So we kind of went with the idea that he is a ghost, and he is kind of it's very much about the masks and different masks, and you know, the mystery of him. So there are elements in the office, if you look around the office, that will show you that kind of symbolism, really, which is what we used for him in the end.
This kind of came to the crux when we were trying to figure out what's in his secret room. There was a lot of debate about whether his hidden room should be like a sort of Kingsman inspired, you know, like wood paneled and kind of luxurious, you know, and sort of slick in that sort of way, you know, like an old school, like a British gentleman sort of version of it. Or should it be really stylish and modern and you know, like extremely slick in a sort of modern kind of way? And we really went around the houses with this, and eventually the way we realized it should be is that it should be very, very stark and just be completely functional. You're expecting a reveal, you're expecting to find out something about this guy, but all you find out when you get right into the heart of the matter is just that bust, that 3D print of his head staring back at you. That's all you get. You don't get anything more. And so that was exciting. I thought that was it was very telling, going on that sort of, you know, that trying to find out what that little room should be told us actually what the Jackal kind of was, you know, and so that was an interesting process.
Oh, that's quite brilliant. I love your process in getting to that point. And it was so effective to see that it's as stripped down and kind of devoid of information as he is. And I loved his necessary items, the passports and the money and the weapons. Just brilliant, really an exciting discovery in the house. MI6, I have to talk about that. We do these command centers a lot, and these tech rooms. What inspired you in pulling together this version of MI6?
The set itself, in terms of the kind of architecture of it, was an interesting one, because we were originally going to build this in a warehouse space that was a weird shape, and it was just a very long, thin building. And so I started thinking about, how to maximize this space to create something interesting. And I went to All the President's Men, basically, and the apartment where you've got those long grid ceilings, and just felt, let's create something with perspective. That's what we have in this space. We have length, we don't have width. And so that was the origin of the layout. In the end, we actually got a way bigger studio. We didn't have to build it that way, but the idea stuck. There you can see the ceiling being constructed, which was the first thing to go up. So you can see it's not a particularly high space, but it didn't have to be. It was an extremely interesting procedure, because it's MI6. You got no idea what it looks like inside. There's it's the secret intelligence building. So there's literally no photographs of the interior. But I think Claire found this very interesting work by an artist called Hart Dyke, who was a kind of a locum artist with MI6 for a little while, and that was the best reference we found. And I'll let Claire talk about the detail a little bit.
Well, to be honest, he did like a residency at MI6. But what happened is he did this residency, and there was a number, I think there were 5 images, Richard, if I'm right, which were kind of useful to us, but apparently all the images that he had done while he was there could not be shown. So we never, I did try and contact him to try and see if I could get any more information, but I never heard from him in the end. So, but even the few drawings that he had, they were helpful. There were small details. There were, like, for me, there were small kind of human details in it, which obviously as an artist he'd kind of picked up on. And rather than the kind of architecture of some of the rooms, there were just small things that he'd done, just in terms of water bottles and cups and things that were just unusual.
There's a kind of slightly retro styling about it all that was in those sketches as well, that kind of filters through into this set. And it was fun, because we obviously we have the exterior building, it's the real exterior. So actually there's a sequence where you see Bianca walking to work through Vauxhall, and you see the MI6 building she's headed to, and then you cut to the gates that we'd built in Hungary on a back lot. She goes through the gates, and then she appears in the set, which is again in Budapest. So that's fun. I mean, that to me is just fun. It's a fun research process. It's imaginative as well as big linked to the real world. And it's also hopefully, pulling off a trick where someone, is in one place and then appears somewhere else, and it feels like it's all one world.
Yeah, you had a lot of those transitions, and they were all so smooth and effective.
I mean, just to say about the exterior of MI6, when we were in London, when we were doing a recce, I don't know if I was the only one, but I definitely got told off, because obviously the door is kind of open and close and open and close, and obviously I'm keen to and that apparently is not allowed at all. I think it worked brilliantly, I must say. I thought the build and as you say, the transition into the building, the clocks on the wall, which is meeting room, it was just a nod to the original film. We kind of did a little bit of that here and there, but that one is probably the most obvious one.
There were so many things that were familiar in terms of the mood, what you're talking about with that era of cinema. It's just a lot of fun. There was an interrogation room at MI6 that's so imaginative and kind of unexpected. What was the story with that?
One of our references was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. There's a sort of soundproof room in Tinker Tailor that I always thought was a fantastic Mirja Jerkovic design, and I thought, well, how cool would it be to do an updated version of that? And I just could not figure out, how you would do it. And then I came across this soundproofing. I think it was used for another film they'd made in Hungary about Formula One. And so we use this like it's an updated kind of soundproofing, and 3D printed it. And I think they're all regular tiles, but they're just switched around. And then we had this thing of how do we do the door, and then we just covered the door, and the door disappeared. Well, that's how you do it. So yeah, that was again a really fun thing to do.
What were your parameters with your approach to color on the project?
Well, it was about creating atmosphere and a sort of a tone that made people look good. That was the thing. It was working with skin tones and lighting, and Chris Ross, the DOP, a lot. And we did a lot of tests, and that's the only way with color. Well, it's not the only way, but it's the best way is to camera test it with your actors. And that's what we did, and I think it was worth it, because we made a lot of tweaks and little small incremental changes to the colors that I think made quite a big difference. And it's also about the finish, so not using a pure matte finish, but having a little bit of a shiny glaze on everything. And Brian is a bit of an expert at this as well. Brian, the director, was very involved in this entire process and the level of kind of aging, and it's all incremental, but it all adds up. And defining the different, it's really important that you know where you are the whole time. So the Jackal's villa, for example, and sort of Spanish world is a very different feeling in its color tone to the UK, for instance. And so yeah, that was it's a whole balancing act, and it was an interesting one. And of course, costume was heavily involved in that. Natalie, the costume designer, who was completely involved in all of these tests, and Mel, the makeup designer. It was a real collaboration, and it was really fun. And the actors had an opinion, which was always good to get as well. So it was good. And I think, Bianca's house in particular was really, I thought, just in terms of the way it came together with the dressing, was just really pleasing, because it was not what I was expecting. And I think that's the most exciting thing that can happen in a way, is that something kind of just, grows wings and becomes, something more interesting than you were hoping for. And the actors came on, and they really, really loved it. I hope I'm not sort of over exaggerating, but they really, really liked it. I've never had an actor hug me before when they walk on set, because they like it so much, but I did on this one. Yeah, it was extremely exciting.
The input of the actors was definitely helpful as well. But I also wanted to mention, because Richard was talking about before, the color, especially in Bianca's house, the color of the wood and the color of the walls. We did so many tests on those to get those right, and in the end, I think it really worked beautifully, and it was really worth it. But we did a lot, didn't we, Richard, on the color for that?
We really did. We knew, and I think with Brian, the director, and with Lashana, and I think we all kind of knew what we were working from. We knew that this place was in West London, sort of Notting Hill area, which is a really rich visual starting point. One reference for me anyway was Performance, which was a film completely different era again, but designed by Christopher Gibb, who is an interior designer and brought a lot of those kind of geometric Moroccan patterns and so on into it. So there's that great like little Eastern touch to it as well. So it's there was a lot of different influences on it, and yeah, it was a really fun set to do. But I have to say, I'm not, Claire definitely brought a new level of bringing this art that's the genuine stuff from young Black British artists and things like that was just really exciting. And also historical photography of the area, that the characters' parents might have been involved in, the development of the area too. So, intellectual development and physical development. So it's just great. There's a lot of layers there, and it was quite hard work actually as well. But it did probably pay off.
Another set that seemed really rich to me was Becker's apartment.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for that set, I must say.
You got in trouble in this one. You got told off for too much detail.
The detail that we put into this set, right down to where Becca was originally supposed to be sitting before he was obviously murdered, and he was eating sunflower seeds, and the crumbs of that and the shells were on the floor, and we gave him like a whole kitchen area. We gave him like there was like a washing area, there was a sleeping area, there was a bed. And actually, when you see it in the clip, it is dark, and it's, you kind of catch shapes, and you probably don't get the dust on the table. Or, well, I got a little bit in trouble because when the set was done and we were dressing it, I was straight in there with a little bit of sandpaper, because I'm like, no, the wallpaper's too clean. And I was sanding the wallpaper and just sort of peeling it back a little bit. And probably, I don't know if you see it, but I always think on a set, you feel it if it's not there. If it's there, it kind of ends up becoming part of the whole palette. I mean, now we're in the bathroom, and all of the tiles that you see, our graphic designer Mary made these beautiful prints which were on vinyl, and we put on not all of the tiles, but we worked out a pattern. Every small thing becomes such a big thing in itself, how you're going to lay it. But these went all around the bathroom, and actually you can probably just see that one tile. What a drama the whole thing was.
But touching on the graphics there, I mean, they were a big thing all the way through. We tested this extensively as well, because this was the first thing we shot. There's also the first scene of the Day of the Jackal, so it felt critical. We built the set so that you could get the camera into impossible places. So right at the beginning, the camera is in the bathroom with the character, and once he's left the bathroom, walks down the corridor, we've slid in this bit of set that you can see now. So the back wall of the bathroom and the door was all out when the sequence started. So the whole set's moving around. Well, not the entire set, but the back wall of the set is moving around during the sequence, and every little detail was absolutely analyzed, tested, and we had fun doing it. I mean, it was a very specific atmosphere, but all of these lights that you see off camera here, some of the shapes, the mirror has this kind of rounded corners, and we've echoed that in some of the door frames and things. A lot of thought and a lot of fun went into doing this, and it's in the scripts. I mean, they're when you read this, when you first get episode 1 and you read this scene, you're like, wow, this is cool. This is exciting.
And just to say also, in terms of the chair, so we upholstered the chair, but we had a few different options of chairs, and it was all to do with the height of the arms, and where it seems so simple, you just put a chair in there, but actually that was also, we did quite a lot of tests on that. We had quite a lot of options for that. How you see the body in the chair and how the body was going to lay in the chair was all relevant to all the dimensions of the chair were very highly thought out in the end. It became, oh, we can't just get a chair.
I'd forgotten that there was a whole lineup of chairs, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And also, I think I'd forgotten that this is all one take. So, which is part of the reason why the set had to be built in a certain size, just so there's just enough space so you could do the camera move without it, but we still wanted it to feel cramped. So yeah, it was an interesting, really interesting balance of different requirements. Yeah.
I love that you're talking about all the complexity and detail and work and pre-planning that go into scenes like this. It was really beautifully done. What do you think of, the pros and cons of doing it the way that you did, where you were shooting locations and stage work? I mean, Claire, did you do a lot of the location work as well?
For the beginning sets, for the first kind of, definitely for the first 5 blocks, other than the Jackal's Spanish villa, the location sets were actually in Hungary as well, for the funeral parlor and for the fest apartment. But the thing is that classic locations where you walk into these amazing buildings and they're essentially derelict, but there's this kind of grandeur to them, these amazing high ceilings and beautiful wood panels and windows and whatever, but they are derelict, so they're kind of moldy, and they're I mean, this was a classic. This is Fest's apartment, and obviously they're incredibly wealthy, and art was a big thing here, but that building we're very grateful for the panels, but actually that was pretty much in there to help us. So it's almost it's kind of like starting with nothing really. I think for you know, for the set decoration part of the job, whether it's location or a set, actually it doesn't become any easier. As it was in this location, we had to change the plugs, the light fittings. We were now supposed to be in Germany. Whatever was in there wasn't correct. Where you see in this picture that lit cabinet, so that cabinet was in there, but it was a massive problem when we went on the recce. Brian wasn't that keen on it, and it was pretty much gonna stay. So it was all a question of what can we do with it? How can we make it fit into this world of these people? So, you know, there's always problems to solve in a location. I don't feel like it's any easier or more difficult than a build really for me.
But I have to say, I mean, this was pure set decoration. This was like, I virtually had nothing to do with this set whatsoever. This is all Claire. In fact, did you do that painting in the back left there?
I did. So the thing is, obviously, I'm London based, but I was in Hungary. I love art, and I'm a painter. And actually, my assistant, he's a painter too. For this particular apartment, I really had something specific in my head. We couldn't find anything to hire or buy, and then there's always the problem of everybody's ugliest C word, which is clearance. And so Gary and I ended up painting a ton. We got a ton of canvases in. We had, you know, Richard and I discussed what kind of art we thought they'd like and what it would look like. And obviously there's the problem of you want it to look like famous, well-known, expensive art, but then you have the problem that it can't look too much like that. But we ended up doing most of the paintings there. Which was, you know, keeps you busy at the weekend. But we also had actually, we did some sculptures, which were, we had them 3D printed, which was actually, yeah, that they worked really well. They came out, we made them bronze, and that worked very well for that apartment too.
Can you guys talk a little bit about the process? I mean, you had one director for all 10 episodes. Or no, you did not. It was for the pilot?
Yeah, we had, so Brian was the lead, and he did episodes 1 to 3. Then we had Anthony Phillipson did he did 4 and 5, I think, and then Paul Wilmshurst did 6, 7, and 8, and then Anu Menon did 9 and 10. I believe. Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that.
Did you run into situations where the blocks were overlapping at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's difficult once you get. Well, things are great, you know. You're just about managing to keep everything on track when you've got one director, yeah. And then another director, you know, appears when you're getting probably towards when you're going to start filming, and it's like, oh hi, and so that's it's always difficult, but luckily all the directors were great, and with Brian we really set up the aesthetic and the, you know, the worlds that we were doing. With, you know, most of the heavy lifting was in terms of design was really all about getting the first section going, and then you know, there was still a lot to do, but that was, hopefully that benefited everybody.
Claire, was it as challenging for you in that regard?
To be honest, I think that the directors were all very respectful of their work, and I think that what Brian had done and how the way it had been set up made it quite easy because it was so strong. Now, I will tell you about one tiny incident, which was in the in MI6 in the main office. Obviously, each of the desks, we actually made all the desks in there. They were very specific, but each of the desks had a person to sit behind that desk, and then we kind of worked out whether they were hot desking or whatever. But all of those people that were at those desks also have a personality. So I decided, as I am, and so is Richard, an Arsenal supporter. I would make one of them an Arsenal fan, and there was a scarf. Arsenal agreed to us putting some stuff in. We got them cleared, and so I put them on the desk. When the second director came in, he was a Spurs fan, and he was like, "We can't have this on the set." He was very specific. He was very cross about it. He's like, there's no way I'm shooting it. So I think, obviously it's quite surface, but everybody brings their personality to it, even in the smallest way. I'm like, well, it's a scarf. He's like, no, we're not having it.
What were some of your favorite sets that you worked on this show?
They're like my children. I love them all equally. Because in every set, like when you kind of approach it, there's so much. I don't think I have a favorite really. I think all of them I really enjoyed in one way or another. I'm less interested in the sets that when we did the shooting range, which is essentially a field, and their targets. I mean, I care about all of the sets. I always want the details, but like that, I have less love for that than I would for the bathroom in Bianca's, say, or or Becca's living area. But yeah, they're all like your children when you're on a set, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to call. I mean, I prefer the built sets are the most fun because you're doing you're creating the most, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I would be really hard pushed to say. I mean, I love Bianca's. I think I really love Bianca's because of the actors' response to it. That was so fun. And then MI6, maybe the biggest kind of the biggest success in terms of the reality of it. Make it, like the cheat. I suppose the cheat of MI6 is satisfying. And then but I really do like the Jackal's Villa as well, because that was the one I was most worried about, because the location is not so great. It was like everybody's like, where did you film it? And people try and rent it and stuff like that, but it doesn't exist. It's like it's a beautiful spot with an amazing swimming pool and a fantastic view, but it's actually just two quite basic houses that don't have much to recommend them apart from they're in this spot. And then we built a big piece of scenery to connect the two, to turn it into this big villa, and which was then worked on in VFX for the aerial shots to make it seem to have scale, and we built the pergola, which became a major sort of playing area, and we built the interiors in Budapest. We partially with the kitchen is on site in Croatia. So I think because a few people said to me, that's not going to work. That just looks horrible. The original location, I was like, oh no, what do we got to do? So that felt like we kind of pulled that off, and that was fun and a great place to work, and an interesting reference journey as well. Figuring out who this guy was.
Yes. Well, what an amazing achievement. I mean, it's one of those shows that really feel like, as you've been describing, like every department was reaching high and you were all in sync with each other. It just feels very seamless, from the cinematography to the costumes to the set design and the decoration. So congratulations, well done. I really enjoyed it, and I hope there's a season 2.
Well, it was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really nice meeting you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was fun.
Best of
Thanks
luck.
a lot.
Cheers.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.